in Afghanistan. Do the people there know anything about Guyana?
Definitely not. Like I said at the beginning, Ghana came, that was the first thing that came to their mind. And I always had to say South America for them to understand that I'm coming from a different part of the world and it's not the African continent. So that was one thing that I always had to do. And one of the things that I had to dispel was the fact that as a woman, independent, professional woman coming from Guyana, my female colleagues and I, we always engage in discussions during our lunch hour. And one of the things that they mentioned to me was that because I am there without my spouse, that was not something positive. They saw it as negative. So I had to use the opportunity to explain to them the difference of culture in the West versus their cultural beliefs. And relationships, as I pointed out to them, for us, is built on trust, and we don't have to have somebody accompany us or anything of the sort. But we can be professional in our own right with and without our spouse. So that was something that you had to explain to them. Once they had a full grasp of what I was saying, they really opened up to me, and we became, until now, very good friends, sharing information. They always keep me updated about what's going on in their lives, etc. So that was one of the major things that I encountered, that I had to really spend time explaining to them. Another area that I had to focus on was girls' education. Because of what was happening in their own country, they think that many other parts of the world, including Guyana, we encountered the same issues of girls' education. So I had to explain to them, in Guyana, we have a slightly different situation. We are focusing on boys' education, and I had to tell them why we have to focus on boys' education, because there was such a push, right? In the earlier years, girls' education, that the girls have been pushed and they have propelled and they have gone past the guys, and that there are more females in the university than they are males, etc. So I had to spend time getting them to understand that it's different. In terms of food and the way of dress and other things, right? I managed to also tell them more about it. But I can tell you a little bit more. I wanted to see what else I had to share on my screen.
Go ahead, just go ahead.
And then we can get back to something else. Okay. Now I wanted you to see what happens behind the burqa.
Ah, yes.
Right? We might feel that the women, they just have on the burqa, but they're not, properly attired. They're always well dressed, always well made up, and well adorned with jewelry. Good. I had a few jewelry with me, not much, and I went to a wedding. Boy, and when these women took off their burqas and I saw them, I was shocked. My little jewelry, gold jewelry I brought from Guyana, paled insignificant to what they were wearing. So this is an idea of what, you can find in Afghanistan.
Yes, I've always heard that, the women are well made up and so on.
Very, very well made up.
And, all the fineries are really for those who are in the home with them or who are close to them, not for the public.
Yes. Exactly. And they say they adorn themselves, for their spouse, and they have to display. And then I understood when I'm traveling like when I'm at the airport in Dubai and you see these men buying all these lovely, women jewelry, and so I understood what it was for, and I really understood the role that the men played. Here I have the children. I love the children so much. I miss them. And you see what the boys will dress. Already they look like men. They're beginning to look like men. This is what they would wear. And the girls dress in this manner here. So you see how they are always well covered. Even in the classroom, they are well covered. Okay, we didn't talk about the food yet.
Yes.
Okay, well, just to say, the food is something that I had to get accustomed to. Because for me, they use a lot of meats. Everything was about, the mutton and, chicken. They just use a lot of meat, very little vegetables. So I missed having salads. Good. I miss my regular bread. This here, the naan bread that they use, the flat bread. But I quickly adjusted to that. They cook it, to my mind, at least the cook that we had, with a lot of oil. And, even when they fry the egg, right, came and there was just too much oil for me. And I remember one day trying to advise our cook on how to do the egg, and he was so upset with me because I'm a woman and I'm telling him what to do. But they had to explain to him, and then even getting me to share the kitchen with him took quite a bit of cajoling and explanation. And he eventually allowed me to be in the kitchen and cook and join with him, because I wanted to share a bit of my culture with them.
Okay.
And I remember once we had some folks over for dinner, and I made cocoa rice. So everybody was commenting on this and asking, oh, who did this? It tastes so good. It's different. And so the cook said, everybody said, oh, Barbie cook. I said, yes. No. Barbara no cook. Book cook. Because I used a recipe. What's cooking in the other book. Said, book cook. Barbara no cook. But when I was leaving, he insisted that I left that recipe book with him. Right? So, that was one good exchange in terms of the meals that we had. And every now and then, like when it's a holiday in Guyana, I would tell them I am doing the cooking, and I would try to cook our traditional meals. One time I took back some casserole and I made them pepper pot. And I did made some roti so that they can see some different kind of roti.
Right,
and so we had lots of exchange in terms of cooking itself and sharing of knowledge. But I like the food very much eventually.
Yes,
when you visited yes, and then when you visited a home, the way you see this here, it would be on a big platter, the rice, and the meat is on the here. So this might just look like rice, but the meat is always on the there. They do a cooking in like the earth with the meat. It's very nice. But we all ate from the same platter when we were at a dinner. And we sit on the floor. But I still don't know how to plant my feet completely, but I managed to sit and to, they spread the plastic or so on the ground itself, and that's how we ate. So yes,
this communal eating is something that's prevalent in a number of different cultures.
Yes, what is very fascinating with them that I really like is when it's iftar, because everyone is doing the same religion. Good. They get home at the same time and everything. So they participate. It's a big feast for iftar, big feast. And there was one time we had the governor invited us for iftar at a hotel, and this is coming back to gender issues. And I was invited as well because he heard that I was doing Ramadan with everybody else, so he was really impressed. And when we got to the hotel, I ascended the stairs just like everyone else, or with my colleagues. All my colleagues are male, obviously. But when we got to the top, I noticed there was a commotion and the guards were kind of scurrying. But then I was quickly shuttled off to a section, and a curtain was pulled, and I was in a room.
All alone.
And I was in a room with just women.
Oh, okay. The other women. Yeah.
So what I mean, I was not prepared for that, but the thing is, as a woman, I was not supposed to ascend the main stairs with the men.
Oh, you were
there was a side door for me to enter into to be with the women. God? So you don't see the men, you don't be part of the actual reception, but you're in a room and the things will come in there for you to eat. So that in itself was another area that I had to adjust to.
Yes, I can well imagine, all these experiences that you've had. Now, what aspects of the Afghan culture have continued to inform you, maybe the way you view life, the way you view society? I know you mentioned earlier the thing about, like being in an office and having the door open, being adjusting to that kind of thing, not being in a room with a man alone like that. So are there any other aspects of your culture that have stayed with you, that have continue to inform how you view life or society?
Yeah, coming back to what you just said, I must say I never worked in an office since then where I closed the door. Never. Always have an open door. And that is really because I feel that when people want to engage you, they should feel free. And, it's part open door policy, but with a difference. You can close, if there's a meeting, you may have to close the door. But, since then, I because I kind of liked it, you feel a part of the rest of the office. I remember in India, they were asking me why I don't close my door. But I couldn't bring myself after them to close the door. But apart from them, one of the things that I liked about them is their determination. And they're never in a hurry to get something done. They believe they can wait anything out, but it will be done in their time. But it will be done. That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. So even as I work and I do things, I know it has to be done, it will be done, but I don't get flustered about it if it's not being done at the time that I had anticipated it would be done.
Right, exactly.
And you look at not just in Afghanistan, but even in my experience in Syria, that these are people who are living in the community. As international staff, we are always sort of protected. We are living in a guest house where we are, well guarded, or we living in the case of Syria, you're living in a hotel, well protected, well guarded. But your staff, who are national staff, they are actually in the community. And many nights you're hearing the bombs, you're hearing the gunshots, right? Sometimes during the day, whether it's Friday because they don't work on Fridays, you're seeing the bombing, you're seeing the plume of smoke, etc. And they would come to work and greet you, Sabal, it's Sabal here in the case of Syria, or Assalamu alaikum in the case of Afghanistan. And with a smile, warm greeting. And it taught me something about appreciating life itself, God, and not allowing all that's happening around you to get you nervous and to get you, allow anxiety to step in. I've seen other colleagues who did suffer from a bit of anxiety or so. But one of the things that, living in that kind of society taught me was the drive, determination, and staying calm on the very stressful situations.
Yes, I can imagine. Yes, and that I know you have some other images to share with us. So if you could go ahead and share those images, and then we're going to talk about now that you're back home. How, yeah, we're going to talk about that after.
Okay. I just wanted to share some pictures with me. Here I am with the female colleagues. You notice some of them are still with their heads covered, even though we're in the office and we're away from the men, but they will keep their heads covered. Here, one of my colleagues, she just wrapped my head like a turban. And I was wearing one of their the robes that the women sometimes wear most of the time. These are the classrooms. We take a lot for granted that our children must be in classrooms with our bench and desk and everything. But here you see that most of this one here is from a girls' school, a very well-off girls' school. This is in a building, but they have desk and bench. Here, it's in a tent, and there are no furniture, so they're seated on the ground. And this here is in a mud hut that the children are learning in. So I wanted you to have an idea of that as well. And like I said, here is a good classroom. And these are supplies that we delivered for the children, what we call the school in a box, where you have different items for children and teachers to utilize in the classroom. And this is a teacher in one of the mud type, how huts like, and they're using it as a classroom. She's writing right on the wall.
Yeah, right.
Right. And this here is a tent as well. This here is the teacher training that I was doing while we were there. And you would notice that although they are in groups, the male are, across this way and the females are this side, right? But this was just an effort to get them to interact a bit. And here, although they're in a learning setting, you would often find a child who accompany a parent, and there's nothing you can do because there were no facilities for them to have the children separately. One of the stories that I can tell about teacher training, it's we were doing a training programs using computers to have a database set up for the different provinces. And so we had the computers for the number of persons who were going to be trained, and the package and the CDs, everything laid out. And as I started the training, I saw someone, one woman was sitting away from a computer, and I kept asking my staff, why is there an extra person in the classroom, right? And why this person didn't have a computer nor the materials. So we kept counting, we keep getting one extra. And when we sought inquired and we went through the names, it was the Maharam who had accompanied her, that's a male person, who brought her from the province to here at the capital city in the Western region, who had accompanied her, was seated there in the classroom at the computer, right? So I had to get my staff to talk to him and explain so that he waits outside while we can conduct the class with her inside. But that's how they protect him. Yes, his role as a Maharam. Even when we were doing the budget for the training workshop, I quickly learned and understood that whenever you're doing a training workshop, you need to make provision for accommodation for the male that will accompany a woman, whether it's her spouse, her son, her brother, a male, as well as for meals and travel for that person. So those are some things that were quite different to what we used to in my country here in Guyana. Or beyond the classroom, the children do play like others do. This here is a child at one of the water pumps that we had installed to bring, we try to bring the classroom, the community to the classroom as well. So the water that's at the school is for the community as well. And we use education as the base for community development. That's what we're doing. Children, these here are children in what we call internally displaced people's camps. So those are persons who were displaced from different provinces, but you bring them in a camp setting, and we have to ensure that they continue with their education. So, you know, we had to set up centers to them. So these are children in one of those centers. It's very difficult. It's nothing like we are used to.
I can really imagine.
Yes. And here you'll find me in some of these pictures here. I'm seated here, but these are all my colleagues here, the males in front, these. And you see I'm the only female. I spoke at this function and my colleague said, oh, Barbie, you were very good. Your speech was good, but your hair was showing. So here you see a bit of my hair was showing. This is a workshop. The middle one is a workshop that I had. I was using I try to use very participatory methods when I'm working with them to get them more involved in what they were doing and for greater interaction. So you see, these are some of the education officers that I worked with. And this here is a visit to Farah City where we were doing some work with the children. And I'm right here.
Yes, your hair is showing there too.
Help it. I try everything and it's always peeping out. And that's what they always tell me. Hair was peeping out, you know? This is outdoor classrooms. Winter times, these are very difficult. We had to do a lot of work with buildings to make sure that they are properly ventilated so that children can occupy them during winter periods. And this is, you know, persons teaching young girls.
So yeah, you very good work, you know, that you and UNICEF on behalf of UNICEF that you've done there in Afghanistan. And thank you for sharing with us. You know, we were able to see a lot of this we really don't hear too much about on the news, but you were able to actually be there, and thanks for sharing that with us. So now you're back home, and you didn't come straight back. As you mentioned, you're from Afghanistan. You had a number of very other postings in your work with UNICEF, and I know you also were with our consulate in New York, the Guyana consulate in New York, before you returned to Guyana. So now you're back in Guyana. How has it been for you now, reintegrated in your home society and having returned from so many years living and working abroad?
Okay, let me put it this way. One of the things that I did and I tried to do while I was on my different posting, and even while I was at the Consul General at the Guyana Consulate in New York, was to maintain contact with home. So I made it a point of every year coming back home. I spent most Christmases at home or sometime during summer. I would always come back to Guyana. Now I realized that those were just short, quick visits. 2 weeks is nothing to be home. So now that I am back, I am really now, as you mentioned, reintegrating into my own society. So I have to reacquaint myself with the way we operated or how we are operating now. Things have changed. And one of the very noticeable things about Guyana now is the number of foreigners who are here in our community now. So you have to adjust to that. You walk some places and you hear, people speaking Spanish or Portuguese because we have an influx of Brazilians and Venezuelans and Cubans,
right.
in our society. So, sometimes I hear, because I worked in Mozambique, I speak Portuguese, so I can pick up the language, and even from Spanish, I worked a lot in Latin America as well. But apart from that, our own people, and sometimes you realize that you have moved on and that you have grown to accept and appreciate others' culture. And because of that, there are things that you tend to overlook that you find others really getting upset about or feeling, the incursion of others in the society. I recall that there are times when I felt like a foreigner in others' countries, but they made me feel comfortable in there. So you always try to accommodate and be helpful to those who are foreigners.
Yes.
I tend not to accept substandard services when I go places, and people tell you, oh, this is Guyana, what else you expect? And I'm not one for that, because I always feel that we can do better as a people. Not that I'm beating them down, but because I know that we came from a better background.
Yes.
Things were a lot different, and for some reasons we allow things to be swept under the carpet or to overlook certain behaviors.
We've come to, in many cases, accept or mediocrity, accept mediocrity, whereas we shouldn't, and there was a period when we didn't. So
Right. Yeah, and you try to do it in a very calm way, and not to ruffle their feathers as well. You ask them, maybe you could, you could say, ask a person in a different manner, or you walk into a place and they are abusing the workers in your presence, and that one I can't tolerate. You try to tell them, I'm sure that you can talk to them right later, in without us being there. Right now I'm busy, good, readjusting to my own home, but it's been a long time, and when you actually in it, then you realize how many things you missed doing, right? Sorting like pictures and the different things that you would have accumulated over the years that you never had a chance to appreciate. I have a little corner, my little African corner, my little Asian corner in the home, just to remind me of the time that I spent in different places. And I can't help eating and eating the food that I miss so much.
Wow.
So yes, I'm back to doing that, and working again in the community. Like I said at the beginning, I'm always concerned about people and their way of life and how they socialize and live in the environment. So I'm also a member of the Lions International. I'm a member of the Georgetown Dearborn Park Lions Club. So I'm back to my community work as well, serving. That I always like to do. I always like to serve. So I'm given that opportunity during this time of reintegrating into my society.
Okay, good. Excellent. So to wrap up, there are just two last things we want to talk about. First of all, you did mention lots of the different things you learned, but if you could just any lessons that you would like to share, things that you've learned from living abroad, and then after that, you're just going to give us your final thoughts on the importance of appreciating other cultures.
Okay. In terms of lessons I learned, I think my biggest takeaway from working abroad is to be true to yourself and to be professional and honest in whatever you're trying to impart. And I say this, I think I mentioned to you earlier about the home-based school initiative that I was launching in Afghanistan. And I always remember the director when he was having this pushback as to the number of males versus females who should be trained. And I insisted that it should be women. When I was leaving Afghanistan, I didn't tell them, I didn't want them to know I was leaving, because I said I'll tell them closer to the time. And I was invited to a closing workshop that the ministry had for teachers. And I arrived, I went in, I sat down and everything. And then the director was giving his remarks. And he asked me to, could I ask they call me Miss Barbara. Could I ask Miss Barbara to stand? So I stood. And then he asked me to turn around. I did that. And when I turned around, what I saw was a room filled with women, right? Hundreds of women. And he said to them that Barbara is the cause of this. And he told them the story. And he said, what struck him that day was Barbara believed in what she came here to do, to improve girls' education. Some people would have left it, and some people would not have pointed them in the right direction, but she believed in what she came here to do. And I was a bit emotional about it. And then they told him that then my staff said, oh, and she's leaving us. And then it was another scene. But what I took away from what he had to say and what he wrote on my a lovely certificate that he'd given me was that, but you don't have to impose your will on people or impose the training that you receive. You have the tools, you listen to or you observe what's going on within a society, because I work several places, but then you try to merge what you have with what they have and try to establish that link. Because he said, when I told him that they are women, we could find them at a transit point, we can find them in the homes, right? I brought a new dynamic into the way he was working. They were just looking at what they could physically see and not what they can search for. So I believe in God trying to ensure that you would like to do something that will make society better. But you have to be honest and true about what you intend to do. But at the same time, you don't try to ruffle feathers or to push and force your beliefs on people, but rather do it in a way that you can easily get their buy-in. And I had to do that several times. So I think that was one of the lessons that I learned. And, it's important to be observant in any society, both for your security as well as for the knowledge you would like to impart. Another lesson I learned, I think I mentioned it earlier too, was how to be calm. Things are happening. I had to use a lot of this while I was at the consulate in New York recently when the pandemic hit. But to be prepared, first of all, And we were prepared because I brought my experience from the UN in terms of emergency preparedness. So make sure your staff are prepared, your office is prepared, and whatever, so that you're not flustered and everyone around you becomes, unnerved and unsettling. So those are some of the things that I think my experience, they were war-torn areas, but I like the adrenaline that it brought with it. At the same time, it taught me how to be calm and most of all, the respect and appreciation of others' cultures. Just like how I came from a culture, others did as well. And we need to be respectful and tolerant of others. So not just so that you can be accepted, but so that they can see the way that you're treating with them and show you the respect that is due as well. Yes. So those were the lessons I learned.
Yes, so thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you for being with us. And when you spoke about your experiences with that turning around and seeing that room full of women, I'm sure that must have been a very, not just emotional, but gratifying experience for you. So thank you for sharing your experiences living and working overseas, mainly in Afghanistan. Thank you for sharing all those wonderful experiences. Our eyes have been opened to what has been going on in places like Afghanistan, and we've learned a lot about the culture and interacting with peoples and their cultures. So thank you to the viewers for watching, and we're going to see you soon as we meet new people, share their experiences, and take our culture to the world. And we thank Barbara Atherly again for being with us and sharing with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me as well.